Alphacore issue 1, or really the Justice League of America from Wish? Wes, hi everybody, and welcome to yet another review video. Oh yes, my dear friends, if you've been following European law for quite some time, you know that I have just recently reshifted the general direction of my channel, and I shall be now mainly focusing on reviewing entertainment from both the mainstream and the independent scene, and I have received some requests to review Alphacore issue 1 by Ripperverse, written by Chuck Dixon, the famous writer who is most well known for co-creating the character of Bane and being involved with a lot of DC Comics titles throughout the entire 1990s, and that's where he got the most renown. However, he has always been a prolific writer, and a writer who has dabbled into all the possible different genres, verging from, as I said, writing Batman, and then, of course, adapting The Hobbit into a graphic novel format, or even writing SpongeBob, SquarePants, or Simpsons comic books. Now, I have got a kind of old already interview with Chuck Dixon on my channel. Should you wish to check it out, just go and search for it in the search button thingy there. However, I've been told by many people that Alphacore will be much better than ISOM issue 1 and 2, which I reviewed. Once again, feel free to check out my reviews. And those comic books were not very good at all. I have explained it in detail in those videos why I think that ISOM is a subpar product, and it is only a product, because simply the writing there was absolutely incompetent, and the art was subpar as well, and there was not a non-existent story. We don't know anything about the characters, what their goals are, what their motivations are, who they are really. We know nothing about anything, and the story structure was written that it went from here to there. It jumped in time there and again, and it just resulted into a complete goulash and mishmash of beige, boring, nothing burger, mediocre of an American comic book, which, you have to be honest, is not really in the best space today. Now, the problems with the medium of, the graphic novel medium is mainly in the United States of America, where it seems to be that they can't find competent creators anymore. It's not a problem in Europe or in Japan. European comics and manga are still being produced, and they are still fantastic. And Eric July has put himself in a position of the savior of the American comic book industry, and he talks about it every time at the beginning of his comic books in his The Ripperverse ethic, where he says that, he will respect the customer. From what I've seen, every single piece of criticism that people directed at him was met with insults and with screaming and with blocking, even blocking people who backed his comics originally and spent a lot of money, because his comic books are very expensive. I mean, out of all the independent quote-unquote crowdfunded, because he claims he's not crowdfunding, that he hates crowdfunding or something like that. I mean, don't quote me on that, on the hating. He just wants to distance himself from the crowdfunding scene. Even people who backed and bought his expensive comic books, he blocked them after the tinsiest bit of criticism. Now, the canon and continuity, it seems to me that Eric July is trying to do too much too quickly. Now, he has already published, what was it, ISOM 1, 2, Alphacore, and Yara. And those titles are expanding his universe with a light speed. And then he added some animation and some trailers, which... or the quality of the trailer we will leave for another time. But it seems to me that there are a lot of titles in a short space of time introducing a plethora of characters that we know nothing about, except for the fact that their goals are not clear, but it is very apparent, and we will get to it in this video as well, that they are acting according to their own selfish needs and drives. So let us, comprehensive timeline is just the same thing I was talking about. So let us begin. I will not go through the entire comic book. That would be not really good, because my channel could be stricken with a copyright strike. So I will show you a couple of pages at the beginning. So the writer Chuck Dixon and the penciler John Bennett. Now, there are striking differences at the very beginning already when you compare it to ISOM. Quite clearly, we have to say that the artwork is much better, because the artist is much more competent than the artist in ISOM, which it was proved that he was using the so-called 3D assets, which means that there is a library somewhere on the internet of images that you can use and put in your work of art, quote unquote, just like that, and maybe tweak them a little bit. So he didn't draw the comic book, he put the comic book together as if you were putting together a puzzle, picture. So yeah, that's the first difference there. The artwork is 100% better. Now, there you go, the first parallel. This is Superman. I mean, yes, this is Superman. This is a clear parallel to Superman, and this is one thing that is quite interesting about the comic book. So in order to properly review this comic book, you have to be acquainted with the background of, well, all of it, really. So Eric July was, for a long time, has been, he still is, a YouTuber who's been criticizing the American entertainment industry, mainly focusing on the superhero genre. Critiquing comic books, Marvel, DC, for not providing the reader with a good quality content, and that he's going to be much better, and that his characters are going to be, the good old style American comic book characters, aspirational characters, that, there will be a story that would be comprehensive, and that everybody would be able to understand and follow. So the fact that they will be able to follow it hasn't been met at all. So I've already said that. And so why is he now doing the same thing that the mainstream is doing right now, which is a deconstruction of the comic book superhero genre? Now, Eric July said, and he implied, that he was making his comic books for a specific audience, which is the American comic book reader. And let us not distinguish it into men, women, according to sexualities or genders, whatever. For an American comic book reader, the American comic book reader has been for a long time mainly used to superheroes. And the archetype of the American comic book superhero from a couple of decades ago is this, like spandex, goody two-shoes, aspirational character, like Superman, Captain America, characters who are not acting according to their own selfish drives and needs. They want to help people. They are there to help humanity get better, so you can aspire to be better. His characters, none of them are like this. Alphacore, this superhero team, is basically a parallel, one-to-one parallel to the Justice League Trinity. To Superman, this is clearly Superman. He's even named Solaris, or Solari, which is clearly referring to sun, or the sun god, right? And so then there is a female character, who is Wonder Woman. She is Wonder Woman. She will be somewhere around here. There she is, and later on we will have this brooding character who can fly, but he is a brooding character, this brawler type character, a silent character who is a little bit distancing himself from the rest of the team, and that's of course clearly Batman. And so it's okay that he's drawing parallels to probably the most popular team in the American comic book industry. However, they are all acting in this comic book as if they were victims. So they are constantly complaining. They are constantly in some sort of struggle with the authorities. Because the story really revolves around them at the beginning being involved in a crime case, a crime act that didn't involve people with superpowers. So they were apparently only supposed to help people with the attacks of, like superpowered people, other superpowered people. And so the normal, ordinary cases were not supposed to involve them. And so they broke this rule, and they were absolutely bitching about it the entire comic book. So 3/4 of this comic book is them bickering and arguing and complaining that, they are the victims, and that they deserve more praise, they deserve more appreciation. And it's not something that I think an archetypal American comic book superhero should be doing. This is the Batman character, right? And if you look at the art, at the pictures, as I said, it's competent. But the visualizations of the characters, the individual panels at the beginning of the Superman or Solaris, as I showed you, or this one, they are inspirations, homages. You can say they were swiped from different other comic books published by DC Comics. This image of Solaris arriving, this is like the most iconic pose Superman has been drawn in. And this is, from what I can remember, I can clearly remember seeing Batman in this very pose drawn in the Batman Hush comic book. So that there are parallels, it's okay. It'll draw the precise audience that Eric July wants, the American comic book reader. They know the Justice League. There have been a couple of movies recently about them, understandably. However, if he wants to put his money where his mouth is and save the American comic book industry, in that he should be providing the reader with what they want, wholesome, good, comprehensive stories about comic book characters, comic book superheroes that you can aspire to, being very clear and being very coherent, he's failing. And you could say, oh yes, but this was written by Chuck Dixon, a man who, has worked in the American comic book industry for a long time. Well, I've got a couple of things to say about that. So firstly, he was paid. He was given a big check, I believe. I do believe that Eric July pays his employees, his artists, and his writers very well. So he got a big check. So the man wrote SpongeBob SquarePants. The man wrote Simpsons. The man wrote Conan the Barbarian. The man takes his checks and writes whatever you tell him to write. And of course he's not going to criticize Eric July because he's being paid. Come on, we all get paid. We all have jobs and we all stick to some certain rules, So if I was paid to, write some sort of dummy story about dummy characters, unoriginal, uninspired rip-offs of already existing heroes, if I was given a fat check for it, I would not really complain about it too much. I'd be like, all right, I will get this done. I'll get a lot of money, and I'll get back to writing my own things. So, there you go. And but the one thing is also that it shows that Chuck Dixon is doing it for money, because he has been talking for a long time about that precise thing that I have been talking about here, the deconstruction of the American superhero. Chuck Dixon doesn't like it. Chuck Dixon doesn't even like Batman the Killing Joke too much. Chuck Dixon doesn't appreciate Alan Moore too much and his Watchmen, or even Frank Miller to a certain extent and his The Dark Knight Returns. Because those men, Alan Moore, Frank Miller, Neil Gaiman, so on and so forth, at the end of the 80s, at the beginning of the 90s, they contributed to the deconstruction genre, to the deconstruction of the superhero genre in the American comic book industry to a huge extent, they started it. They started this dark and brooding style of characters that we know nowadays. These men were the prime and chief inspiration to Zack Snyder. Scott Snyder is a writer, comic book writer, to Zack Snyder and his Justice League and his portrayal of Batman and Superman, which a lot of people didn't like. So this Solari character from the from the Alphacore, this man is basically Zack Snyder's Superman. This particular character who people hate. I mean, I don't mind Zack Snyder's Superman. I like his movies. I'm not American. I don't care about Superman. Not one little bit. I am a European. So, you know, the character of Superman means nothing to me. As a matter of fact, I do appreciate a little bit deconstructed Superman because he is a little bit different. He's not that much of an American. So, there you go. I mean, the story is nothing special. Once again, the finishing thoughts are, I've told you what the story is about, them basically complaining all the time, and there is a villain introduced, which is like Electro from Spider-Man. The story is a story. There is nothing special about the story. The writing is definitely more competent than in ISOM, but it is as if you were comparing a goat writing a story compared to Charles Dickens, right? or a sheep compared to Charles Dickens, the sheep being Eric G. Lyther, Charles Dickens being Chuck Dixon. The art is definitely more competent. You can see that there was some actual drawing involved. But otherwise, this is what we are getting from DC Comics all the time today. Because if you look at the current production of the DC Comics publisher, they are not that bad. I mean, you can still find good stories there, mostly Batman. I mean, you can find one-shot or miniseries about Batman every month being published by DC Comics that are good, like actually good. So this is average. And that's the worst thing of all. This isn't good at all. It's far from being good. But it is not on the same level of bad as ISOM. So it's neither good nor bad, which is the worst thing ever. This is absolutely average, and it means nothing, and it tells nothing. And you would be much better off going to a comic book shop and buying yourself a Batman comic book. Even a new one. Because it's miles better than this one. You like Chuck Dixon. You will be much better off going and buying a collected edition of his Batman stuff, which is miles better than this. 99% of everything that you can get in the United States of America today concerning comic books is miles better than this. Both in the mainstream and the independent scene. Because this is average. And I will forget about it in a day. When you ask me tomorrow about something from this comic book, I will most certainly not remember it. Because it was such, it was like meh. So, see, once again, Superman. So, this is all from me. Sorry for the long review, but I had a lot of things to say. So let me know in the comments down below what you think, and that will be all. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm out of here.